Groups and People, Lawrence Wingate of Wingate TV, Marcus Hart of Transform You Media, Zach Clayton from the PAC Channel, and Jay Stoyan of the Disability Channel, all for replaying our shows on their platforms. Let's just get straight to the show. I'm going to pass it over to Jen. Have at it.
Hey, everybody. Thanks for tuning in. This is, like EJ said, another episode of JAWS Mental Health Awareness. So many of you who listen, either you yourself or somebody you know has a mental health illness. And so many of us wonder, when we feel tired, are we just simply tired? And then we often hear from different providers, whether it's a therapist or it's a psychiatrist, well, maybe you're just going through depression, or maybe you're in flight mode because you have PTSD, or all these other possibilities of what could be really going on. But how many times do we sit and actually acknowledge that there are other causes of fatigue? Like, for example, I didn't realize until maybe 2 or 3 weeks ago, when I, for the first time in I don't know how many decades, maybe even my entire life, went to an ear, nose, and throat doctor, realizing that they are actually allergy doctors and not just the doctor you go to for being sick. And he surprisingly gave me nasal spray, a couple I still have right here, because he's having me basically continue to use these 2 nasal sprays. And I started using it as he prescribed, got energy, got more active in the community, got a more full schedule with work, all these other great activities and things coming out of it. I had energy. Well, then I ended up finding out that in spite of all this energy, I had depression going on. So Tuesday, almost a week ago, my psychiatrist increased my antidepressant medication, and I started to feel better. I actually found myself, instead of tired or energy, but like I wanted to be more sedentary, but I was active, but I had plenty of energy to do brain power of all this work and stuff, working a full schedule and all. Well, she increased my antidepressant, and I found myself back at the gym, back on my Bible study, back on all these social groups, back on networking, back on more stuff. And then yesterday came. Yesterday started a 10-day period before a diagnostics test of my allergens, where my ear, nose, and throat doctor, then again, is going to, on Tuesday, that's almost a week away, drop different allergens on my back and see how high the level of my skin rises. And I'll tell him if I'm allergic, and if so, how allergic I am to whatever are these allergens. Well, because of that, I had to 10 days beforehand stop taking all of my medications related to allergies. And stop taking these medications. I'm sitting here going, I don't know when to even get up out of bed. I don't know that I even want to go to the gym. I don't have the energy for all this stuff. And I got on my computer to have a phone call with my therapist, and I am like, what in the world? Do you even think this is mental health related? She's like, well, you may be going through depression. And I said, okay, look at my calendar. Let's reassess this. So Tuesday, my antidepressant was increased. And by Thursday, 2 days later, I was back at a workout class on Thursday, and then some other activities that were after that, before then to my work stuff. And then Friday, similar. But that one was 2.5 hours of working out, and then to the afternoon stuff where I meet with different people related to my job. So all these days of working out, and I'm back into the rhythm of things, and then I'm tired now. What's to say suddenly the antidepressant it suddenly goes down? I mean, this doesn't make any sense. So, according to research, This is because I'm not taking my allergy medicines, because that 10-day period before the testing that he said I was not allowed to take my Allegra, not allowed to use these nasal sprays or anything else that is used to control the symptoms or the actual allergy itself. So then again, if I'm tired, is it necessarily mental health, or is there a possibility more of us than we really believe have environmental allergies?
Wow.
We don't usually think about allergies when we're tired. We go for caffeine, don't we? Caffeine, some kind of booster, like these supplements and stuff that are the boosters. I've got here an energy drink myself I'm drinking while talking to keep me going. But you don't hear me like having congestion in my sinuses or anything like that. So like you and I, EJ, as everyday people, we never would have even thought that I was having allergies going on, would we?
No. Uh-oh.
How many of us were on here listening to the show or participating? And the first thing we think when we get this fatigue, or maybe it's insomnia as opposed to oversleeping, but it's some degree of tired because of whichever direction your sleeping patterns have gone, we think maybe I'm depressed, maybe I'm in flight mode because I have PTSD, or maybe on the other end, I know you said you have panic, but don't you sometimes with that feel like you have too much energy that's not normal?
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah.
So it's then again a shift in energy, but yours is where you get more energy versus mine where I lose it and I'm sleeping more. I mean, but whatever direction our energy transitions, I think we need to start looking outside of just the scope of mental health, because we have one doesn't mean we don't have any other.
That's amazing.
I mean, how many things, especially if we watch these commercials with all these different drugs, you know how in the last decade there's been laws passed, so now these different medications can market to us, right?
Right.
We put up with it when we're watching TV, like especially my family, we watch TV from when we all get off until bedtime. That's our family time together, is watching certain shows that we all like.
Right.
How many times in that sitting do you see some kind of drug being marketed? And when they are, don't you pretty much hear sleepiness or fatigue on every single one?
Yeah, definitely.
Here's why this medicine's so great. The side effects include fatigue, drowsiness, such and such. Be careful when you're driving and working on machinery. And you're like, what if I'm a machinist? Are you telling me to go out of work and drive a drug? Be careful while you're driving. What if I'm an Uber driver? I can't be careful while driving any more than my normal careful. Oh, wait. Oh, maybe I shouldn't try the medication because I can't stop my Uber job, or I can't stop my machinery job to try medicine for what employer is going to let me miss, 2 weeks, because that's what doctors usually say is, a new medicine, you have to give it 2 weeks to see if it works.
Right.
Hey, Balls, I'm going to call out for 2 weeks because I'm trying a new med.
Yeah, I don't think that's going to go too well.
But that's the comedy, but then it's pretty truthful too, that a lot of people don't think about.
Yeah.
I mean, if we didn't have a lot of people in machinery related work, how would we have these different things we order off of Amazon or eBay or Poshmark? That's like the modern day kind of eBay. Whatever are these places, Walmart's website. If someone wasn't a machinist, I mean, we wouldn't even have necessarily things being produced in manufacturing that ends up on the retail stores' shelves. That's where we all buy it.
Mm-hmm.
Add the item next to it. So, I mean, thinking about that, that's a good chunk of of something that's along the supply chain of how the rest of us pretty much live our lives. Ordering our food off Amazon, ordering those drinks, ordering that protein mix so we can try to lose weight, Well, somebody was a machinist that assembled the machine. Another somebody that was in manufacturing, putting all the ingredients so that the machine could produce these processed foods. Okay, stay away from machinery. You may make the rest of the world go hungry because Amazon doesn't have food anymore.
Not to mention machinery being your car where you have to get to work with, or
yeah. Well, but even if you didn't look at that as machinery, they often say avoid driving and machinery, right?
Right.
So they see that in those warnings as two separate things. But even though they're two separate things, you do see a point where they kind of cross over. And how many people, sorry, I can't drive, boss. I can't come to work today because I got to try a new drug. I can't drive for 2 weeks.
Yeah,
and I mean, like,
fly.
Right, especially the pre-pandemic world, where so many jobs, like even mine, my business I had before the pandemic, they ended up failing the pandemic. It was an in-person tutoring.
Yeah.
Before the pandemic, like tutoring specifically that I did, people were pulling totally away from and were anti this whole online tutoring thing at that time, because they're like, no, because online you can't show them how to do it, and online you can't this and this. And anyway, just basically it was lower quality, and they weren't worth paying get lower quality and pay the same full price. Well, I had to charge them the same full price, because then instead of just the person I paid to do it as a tutor to work for me, I had to also pay for the equipment. There was whatever kind of software, right?
Right.
So I had more cost and more reason I had to charge the same full price instead of giving a discount because, quote, the tutor didn't travel or whatever convenience. So then again, there's that world. And then there's a modern day where so many jobs are remote now. I mean, look how you and I are working together right now. From
half a country away. Exactly.
There is a timeline between us, and we're on both sides in what's the same second, even if it's on a different hour, right?
Yeah.
And we're in the same place virtually producing something that go back before the pandemic, and they would be like, what are you talking about, Zoom? You have to be in person to produce anything. We are like I don't know, you heard that our comedy, what's his name? Oh, no, my best friend, Sandy Buller. Yeah. Okay, you know the Dolls Follow Your Dreams by Sandy Buller?
On Fridays,
okay,
right,
so now we've got a special deal being built that Kurt and I are trying to build with this potential TV production that's going to make that into a comedy show.
Nice.
And I got Sandy's total submission, as he said, to whatever I want to do with it. Because he's all in. If it's my decision, it's going to happen. So, you know, he's an entertainer, so he already is in that kind of field, which is probably why he's all in versus all famous and everything and some other shy people. But why'd he be an entertainer if he wasn't all in for that kind of stuff?
Exactly.
Okay, so see, he's local to me in Berkshire, Texas, the same small town.
Mm-hmm.
But look how we're 3 people collaborating, and now there's these people we'll be working with, like Wingate Studios, that we're still in our Texas places, you're in North Carolina, and it's getting produced in Charlotte, North Carolina.
Right.
You know, so there you're in Raleigh, and it's being produced in Charlotte, and here we are all over the U.S., different sides, and we're actually producing something together. Like, before the pandemic, you wouldn't have that. It'd be like, oh, if you're going to do acting, you have to actually come in person.
Right.
Well, now I can act virtually. My headshot. And I'm doing the show. Let's talk. But think about that, how that could inspire so many other people between the awakening to realize that, you know, here they could just have allergies and not be sick, not necessarily depressed or anything. And then at the same time, once they get past whatever's going on, all these work, different forms of trade that they can now do without being able to drive.
Yeah.
So even if that if you're in certain fields now, even if that medicine tells you can't drive for 2 weeks, you could still work because you can still get on your computer. Yeah. You still have, you know, whatever house or apartment or whatever living space you have with some kind of desk or table to sit on the computer. I mean, maybe that's not as bad now in the post-pandemic versus the pre-pandemic.
It's definitely a different world.
Yeah. Oh, it is. I'm wondering what my niece and nephew are going to think when they get to be adults and they're like, what's this big pandemic you're talking about?
Yep. Just like we think of as the plague and the plague back in Europe. Like, oh man, it's not comprehensible to us. Now it's a little more comprehensible, but
yeah, and I'm thinking of like my niece and nephew. One is 3 now and one is 6. And I'm like seeing them, you know, let's say 10 years down the road or 20 years down the road when they're an adult or something, when they're at the point that they're both working. Mom, what's this big deal about the pandemic? You and Aunt Lady talk about it all the time. Mom, what is the big deal? The world's always been this way. What are you talking about? They had computers before the pandemic. Of course they had remote work. No, you don't know what you're talking about, darling. You weren't here. Oh, yes, I was, because I was born back in 2020. Yes, a month before it happened. 1 month old. You didn't know anything at that point.
Nothing. And I just have enough trouble with people being born in like the 1990 or in early 2000s. I'm thinking, okay, that just doesn't compute.
Right? I was born in the 80s and I saw the 90s. I remember it very well with AOL. You got mail.
Yes.
Oh, Mom, I'm going to get on the chat because there's such a thing as a chat now. I can actually type up my words.
Okay, I'll show my age.
Available to the general public, you know, because like only the upper middle class had cell phones at that time in the early 90s.
Right. I mean,
and the rest of us. Go ahead.
I was going to say, back when I was in high school, we didn't even know what computers were. My senior year.
We didn't when I was in elementary either.
Yeah, my senior year, we had one computer in the whole school that the math teacher got to use to show little designs going on. That was all it was for. I mean, it was nothing.
Yeah, and I remember when in our house, we had like 8 of us that lived in the same house. I mean, it was a 5 or 6 bedroom house. I don't know. But anyways, it was a big house. And we had a lot of people in there. But I remember the first time my dad brought this big bulky computer, like, you know, the whole desktop things, how bulky they used to be. There was just the screen and all. Yeah. Monitor, that's what we called them.
The monitor.
Yeah. And then the CPU that you'd have to put on the floor under the table, and then the keyboard. And anyways, you know what I mean, how bulky they were.
Oh yeah.
And I remember Dad bringing that home, and I was like, Dad, why you spend so much time on that thing? I'm like, can't you come play with me? No, honey, I'm trying to find a job because I'm unemployed. That's why I can't do, you know, these whatever things I want that they normally would buy. Dad, you spend too much time on that thing. You need to get away from it. Take time away off that thing. I didn't understand what that thing was. And then I think I called her Shay, but it was my cousin who at the time was, when we bought it, it was because she had to have it to go to college. It's right here local in the Houston area, but not in Brookshire. Anyway, so she went to the University of Houston, but she was living in, at the time, Katy, which is the next town over I talk about. Right. So we were all in a house in Katy, but she was living with us instead of her mom that was in Alabama, so she could go to University of Houston while us being like kind of like a free ride, because part of her giving was to babysit us 3 kids as her way of putting in while my parents helped pay her tuition and, you know, that kind of thing.
Right.
So anyways, she had to have that laptop. I mean, that computer, that big monitor and everything. And that was originally why they got it, was because she had to have it to go to U of H back in 94.
Mm-hmm.
Before it was even affordable for everybody to have, they required it for her to go to college. And that's when they brought it in. She moved in and everything. And then I even went to pick on her. Shay, why are you spending so much time staring at that? I mean, and connecting that to mental health, have you realized how much of our mental health is irritated by being on too many electronics?
Oh, yeah.
I mean, we're seeing it here like it's a comedy, but there's, between the allergies could be what's going on, to that the trigger for mental health can be too much time on a computer.
Yep.
I mean, what if that plays into why we've got this mental health crisis that started in the pandemic? Because people are then
going something to do with it.
Because, I mean, it wasn't just a lockdown, because the pandemic continued beyond the lockdown.
Mm-hmm.
So it wasn't just the shutting up of social life, or why have we not got past it and out of it, versus the the rays from these computers, the one I'm looking at and the one you're looking at, they stimulate the brain.
Mm-hmm.
And constant stimulation actually reprograms the brain and or damages it.
Yeah.
So, like,
Not
something
to
finding
mention,
out
even
recently
just
is
the being
that I'm
on.
starting, finding out recently, I'm starting back having epileptic seizures. Well, that's because my brain is too stimulated.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, but there's other things that are too stimulation, like your panic attacks. That's an overactivity in the brain, as opposed to depression or flight, that are the lack of activity in the brain, and can actually be treated by both music and other stuff that stimulates the brain.
In different areas, right?
Well, different areas, but also it's the idea of, does your brain need stimulation, or is it too stimulated and it needs calming?
Right.
So either way, it causes, between you saying it affects different parts of the brain to what I'm saying, still it causes different imbalances in the physical aspect of the brain that can show as neurological conditions or as mental health conditions, like what you're saying.
And then you add in all the crazy stuff of the apps and stuff that were on the computer, not just the computer screen, but the comparing ourselves to others because of what they show, their life being so perfect and wonderful, and their one little trip. They don't show all the other things that have gone on. You've got that whole mentality side of computers.
Well, that's like social media.
Yeah.
Versus like apps, I think of, say, my iHeartRadio or my Spotify radio, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, those are apps, but they're not social media. But like, you're right about social media, because people tend to be somebody different. And actually, my Lifetime magazine, in the March episode or edition, whatever they call them, that it was talking about decluttering our life from electronics beyond what's necessary. And it was talking about because people that spend too much time on electronics often are wasting time with social media related hanging out that is, as far as mental health, it's drowning. And that's what you're talking about.
Yeah.
That being on there, comparing themselves to other people and all, as opposed to being on it because of, like, you and I right now producing a podcast.
Exactly.
So there's some of that's the social media itself, and there's some of it that actually is the being on electronic too much. So there's multiple things going on in that whole realm of what we're talking about.
Yep.
Like different factors.
Definitely.
But that's pretty interesting. That's something else to get into, because then there's, I think more people did become like addicted or reliant or attached in some way to social media as they run away as some way to be social during the lockdown. Yep. But then that goes back to the whole idea of the mental health crisis, and how, even though the pandemic is over, or at least a lot of us think, it may be debatable, but we at least think so, because, the COVID numbers aren't on the news every day anymore, right?
Right.
And there's been no talk in anything related to politics about being another lockdown or anything like that, so we at least think the pandemic's gone.
And I did see an article that said the WHO is the WHO or whatever was saying that officially the pandemic crisis is over. I didn't read the whole article, but that was the headline. So it's not to say that, it's all gone.
World Health Organization.
Yeah, World Health Organization, yeah, has said that the crisis is over. It's not going to be gone, just like the flu or anything else. It's always going to be with us. But the crisis is supposedly over, according to them.
Which is what I'm saying. I think what we defined as a pandemic, meaning that event or point of history is past.
Mm-hmm.
Because the pandemic was the name for the worldwide crisis.
Right.
As a historical event. So Definitely. That's why I'm like, I think we're out of it at least, but what you found would say that's true. But then we can also say the mental illnesses that it kind of induced are not gone.
The ramifications of it, exactly.
Right. But, there's also talk in my mom's job as a psych registered nurse that the mental health crisis was around long before the pandemic. The pandemic is just what heightened it and worsened it to a point that it got national attention.
Yeah, global attention. Yeah, definitely. Oh, definitely right. There before that.
Yeah, but the idea was that, even you and I can say before the pandemic, people kind of frowned on us and discouraged us and thought, oh, you're not good enough because you got depression.
Yeah.
Or whatever.
As you said, back to the doctors, every time you went to the doctor, if they saw that you had depression, then that's all it was. It was never anything else. It was, it's just your depression.
Right. But then there was also what I was saying about the general public of not understanding us. And they were quick to judge us.
Exactly.
Not the doctor, but the general public. Like, say when I was tutoring a student and I would say, well, I understand the struggle and it can be hard to be motivated sometimes. And I'm supposed to understand it because, I do have depression and I struggle with that just because my medicine's not balanced at times. And then sometimes the parents would be like, well, are you a good tutor then? Yeah. And I'm like, well,
blows your mind, doesn't it?
The whole thing was to say that I understood, even if we had different causes, we both at times were struggling with a simple motivation. Like often with my students, the struggle was because for some reason there was some concept related to whichever topic I tutored that they just couldn't understand. They spent all this time trying to understand and they couldn't. And that was why they were there for tutoring, so they could move past it because I could teach that certain concept. But then there's the frown that you get for being mentally ill. There was worse before the pandemic than now, where they say it's something like 70 or 80% of the population now has some kind of mental illness. So if it wasn't in their family history, then they and or others in the family have it because of something related to the trauma or suffering or whatever part of the pandemic that heightened it to reach people that didn't even have family history.
Exactly.
But now that it seems like so many of the majority of us have it, now suddenly it's, okay, well, that's fine. You're still great at whatever you do.
Yeah. Isn't that amazing how that happens?
Yeah. Yeah, so you get where that goes with this whole thing and correlating with the whole mental health thing, right?
Yeah, definitely.
So here we're looking at the different things that could be going on, and then the changes in history related to mental health, and then the possible that we could have allergies going on and not even necessarily depressed or in flight, but need to look outside of just that scope, because how many people are like me and don't know it, in the sense that here I've got neurological and psychological and digestive issues and then all these others. Yeah. But I didn't just say that, oh, well, my gut is acting up and that's just in my head. Well, some people do. They think it's just their nerves acting up, right?
Yeah, yeah.
And that's why I say that.
Ulcers.
Well, it was ulcers or it was just that's your nerves. That's why your stomach's getting sick. As opposed to you go recent enough that was like 3 or 4 years, maybe 2017 or something like that, but 3 or 4 years or something before the pandemic, that they started to find food allergies.
Mm-hmm.
And realizing that this, little gurgle or whatever in your stomach that makes you feel sick are allergies.
Yeah.
They're not just on your head that you're just getting a little, nervous or heightened up or anxious over something.
Yep.
But you
and
actually
how it leads back to everything that we're eating and the things that get put in the food that we're eating, and it all meshes together.
But then that leading to the whole idea of mental health, and that not everything is in your head with this mental health awareness show. See,
mm-hmm.
There can be all these other things going on, whether they're in the world or they're in your own body, and they can show these similar whatever kind of symptoms or reactions, but the picture can be so much bigger of all these other things going on, even though they show what are your mental health symptoms.
Yep.
And that's part of the reason what you said about the realization of food allergies, mm-hmm. and about what we eat, and like even the idea of like we talk about the, stay away from machinery and the manufacturer, right? So that goes to the whole awareness thing that's a little bit more in the last year or two of realizing that manufactured and biomechanic food has chemicals and dyes and other things that are actually poisonous to our body, not so that they'll take our life and kill us, but they do damage to our different organs. That's going back to what you're talking about.
Right.
And those damage to our organs, if it does nothing else, one thing, it gets stored on our belly as fat because our body can't digest it, so it stores it. And then second of all, it actually causes additional medical issues. And what medical issues depends upon which chemical, and different people with different genes have different reactions.
Right.
But still, that it can be anything from, say that it's a processed food, so it's high in fat because of the type of process it went through. Well, something like that, you could say, is because they use that certain process of, mashing up some fat into that whatever to make it delicious, causes heart problems. And then the whole however many of our population have all these heart problems and maybe even death. But it goes back to how many people consumed that certain big popular whatever that was so delicious because it's covered in all the fat that made it good.
Right.
But it wasn't nutritious because it had too much of the fat to balance out the protein or whatever else.
Definitely. Yep.
And that is an example I have based off the, nutrition for, like, say, canned meat versus fresh meat.
Yeah. Wow. That's a lot to take in.
This is what happened when we reduce my workload. I get energy again. I really do when I get really stressed, like how I've been having almost a full day schedule, like full-time schedule for a while now, which is when I've been this whole thing in all of our meetings of like, okay, I can't do that. You need to delegate someone else to do these certain things. I can't take anything more on my plate, and that was why we were at one point hiring all these different people, was that basically I had such a heavy load. I was no longer having energy to do everything. So this bubbly personality just was in the desert.
Yeah.
It was lost out of the world for some time in the desert, lost in the desert. And then here I got rid of our certain things that are before 10 o'clock my time.
Mm-hmm.
So that 10 o'clock events start my day instead of 8 or, 9 kind of central time stuff.
Right.
And that just allowed me to rest more because I can't take naps. One of my hyponatremia, my low sodium condition, one of the symptoms of it, which some people consider based on what your doctors say, to be a mental illness, but for me is a symptom of my medical problem, is insomnia.
Oh, wow.
So I have to take medicine to sleep. Trazodone, it's a safe one, not any that's been ever abused or addicted, but I have to take that to sleep. So I can't take naps during the day because my doctor doesn't write for me to take, 2 or 3 Trazodones a day.
Right.
Yeah, it's a for at nighttime, and that's the only time she expects me to take it. So
Yep.
sleeping later gives me rest versus like a midday break, and I'm doing something social or something to occupy my time and probably consuming caffeine to stay awake. If I
Mhm.
can't.
Yeah,
But see, that's another example of one of those where we tend to think it's all our mental illness, mental health, and then the example of the insomnia with me was a sign of my low salt level that I was able to find out about because I went to my primary care's annual checkup.
Mhm.
And he did all my levels, every single one on the book you can think of. There's everything from every type of blood work to like a urine test and stool test. And anyways, he tested for everything basically.
Yeah.
And he did that. And one of the things he found out was that my sodium was give or take 10 points under what's the low end of normal.
Wow. Eat more chips.
Actually, my nephrologist, the one that treats me for sodium, tells me to eat more protein and meat.
Yeah.
As well as limiting my liquid consumption. He said you need to consume less, like talking about liquid drinking.
Mm-hmm.
But
you don't
I
hear
need
that
to
very often.
I know, right? I never fit norm. Whoever said I was normal was wrong.
That's right. I used to have a button that I wore in college that said "Why be normal," and I had it on a hat. I wore it on my hat, and I had it turned upside down that said "Why be normal."
Yeah, why be normal? And then that goes to the philosophy thing I was discussing with somebody earlier. What is the definition of normal?
It's a good question.
That is a philosophy question because,
Yep.
oh, you're not normal levels. Well, if everybody in this country has something wrong, whether it's obesity, it's diabetes, it's heart problems, it's cholesterol, it's whatever, what in the world is normal? Normal to be diagnosed with something versus we often use it to mean healthy, right?
Right.
But if nobody is healthy and everybody has something, even if they don't take medication, they've never been actually labeled because they never saw a doctor for it, which doesn't mean they don't have it. Just that then they could get health insurance because they, quote, don't have pre-existing.
Right.
Well, they technically still have it, though. So then again, what is normal? That's philosophy right there.
Yeah, I failed philosophy in class.
Huh?
I failed philosophy class.
Oh, you did? I loved it. I studied it in part of my bachelor's degree. It's part of my gen ed.
Yeah. I had to take it as one of my classes, but I did not do well in it. I mean, I passed it, but
with the little bit you could see what I mean about the general question in philosophy that we ask that, and it is not the everyday normal definition because of how philosophy has a different perspective.
Mm-hmm.
Because they sometimes they see normal being what is the average or majority versus when the ideal, that's the more everyday literal meaning.
Yeah.
Like the ideal weight for your height. Okay, well, that's what we call normal. But I see Kurt, what do you call that? Texting us. How are we doing on time?
We are at 40 minutes.
Alrighty then, let's go on to announcements. What you got?
I don't know. What do you have?
Oh, my BA.
all the announcements. It's your time. It's your stuff.
Say something, girl. No.
No, I'm going to turn it over to you.
I'm pulling your leg here and you're just playing with me. Come on, let's pull it more.
Yeah. I'm throwing it right back at you.
Right. So, announcements. For those of you who do not know EJ, who is basically the one doing the recording and the virtual assistant stuff for Jaws Coffee Chat podcast, she is part of our team. And I, Jennifer A. Whitaker, am the host / owner of Jaws Coffee Chat podcast. However, we also work together in ways related to my books, because for those of you who don't know, I'm also an author. You can look up books by Jennifer A. Whitaker, and you will find different books that are on Amazon, Barnes & Nobles, and all kinds of other places that I wrote, and different team members help me work with publishers or find publishers and find other organizations to work with, including EJ sending some emails and doing some stuff like that to help out. And Kurt always interacting with the general population and trying to find out who's around him and everybody else on the team. So we work together, but if you'd like to find out more about what we do, you can go to jensbooksandmore.com. That's JENNS booksandmore.com. You can also go on your favorite social media and look up Jaws Coffee Chat. That's JAWS Coffee Chat. For those of you who are women that have faith in Christ as your Lord, you may also want to check out AspireWomenForExcellence.com, which is a Bible study owned and led by Lady Kendra, who I regularly attend Bible study with. I love her ministry, and I definitely vouch about it because it's been life-changing. It has taught me how to cope in ways that are fit to the Word of God, and not just in ways that are what the world or everyday therapist and whoever would say, but things like going in prayer for whatever are your struggles and asking him for what to do with your time and all kinds of other things. Anyway, so if you want to look up Lady Kendra's Bible study, it's ASPIRE 4FOR. Wait a minute. Aspire Women for Excellence. ASPIRE Women FOR Excellence.com. If I can even spell my own Bible study's name. I'm losing it.
It was easy to say.
It really does
spell it out without looking at it. Yeah, without looking at it, it's hard to spell.
Yeah, because she's got a 6-inch long name. It's all exaggerated, but you know.
All right. Well,
and you can also find more information if you look up World of Ability or Kurt Roskoff, who is the manager of this company and helps do stuff when I am, in the hospital and so forth of all my different conditions acting up. Kurt always runs a show for me in those cases. Support the World of Ability podcast as well. You can find him as well as the Jaws Coffee Chat on your favorite podcast app. That's World of Ability, as well as the ours, which is Jaws, JAWS Coffee Chat. And be sure to subscribe to both and be sure to follow all of us. We will be soon having announcements about a radio show and some book launches and some other stuff going on soon. So for now, it is back to you, oh my VA.
Well, thank you. Just one more time, we'd like to give a special shout out to those that are re-showing our podcasts, to Lawrence Wingate of Wingate TV, Marcus Hart of Transform You Media, Zach Clayton of the PAC channel, and Jay Stoyan of the Disability channel. I appreciate them so much for replaying our shows on their platforms. Thank you to everybody who's been here, watched us either today or in a recording. And our next episode of Mental Health Awareness will be on Monday, May 15th. Correct, Jennifer?
You say, I'm going to make it happen. You're here, I'm here.
All right. So again, be sure to subscribe to our channel and our pages wherever you happen to find us, and check out our website to find out more about our shows. Until next time, we wish you a productive and happy week. Take care, everybody.